We just finished the 8th and 9th bracha, asking for health and asking for parnasa, for income, which perhaps as the center of the bakashot really is like the essence of what we're asking for, if you think of the center as the essence. So now we're on the other side of that, and we're starting to look at the series that a lot of authorities and scholars have identified as brachot that are connected to each other because they sort of lead to the end, sort of the end of time. And you can read a lot into that, like each thing follows ordinally, like the first thing that will happen is the ingathering of the exiles, but you don't have to read it that way. These are sort of aspects of the future redemption that we might be hoping for. And with that, let's take a look at this bracha, which sort of serves as the introduction to that whole section of the Amidah. So I'm going to share the screen. So we are looking at this short bracha, Tekah b'shofar gadol lecherutenu. Sound the great shofar for our freedom. Let's translate it for now. For our cherut, for our freedom. V'sanes lekabetz galuyotenu, or in some versions, lekobtzenu, to gather us together. So either to gather our galuyot, our exiles, or to gather us, which might be the perspective of whether we're in exile or whether we're talking about other people who are in exile. V'kabtzenu yachad me'arba kanfot haaretz, and gather us together from the four corners of the earth. You might sort of remember that imagery from the bracha that comes before the Shema of gathering everybody together from the four ends of the earth. Strikingly and interestingly, the bracha does not state explicitly where we are being gathered, at least in the version that we often daven. It's just sort of either assumed or is left open about where we might be gathered when we are being gathered in as exiles. But there are some versions of the bracha actually in the Bavel tradition that were discovered in the Geniza that specify exactly where we're going to be gathered, either El Neve Kodshecha, to your holy dwelling place. That's from Exodus 15, from the Song of the Sea, and we recite that in davening as well. Or Le'artzenu, to our land. So they're sort of, they filled in the vacuum. If the vacuum was, well, where are we all going to be gathered? So there are some versions of this bracha that later on sort of made that very explicit and said that we're going to be headed to either the temple or to our land. And then in all versions of the bracha, it ends, Baruch atah Hashem mikabetz nidchei amo Yisrael. Blessed are you, God, who gathers in the rejected of his nation, Israel. And just noticing here as well, which we've seen throughout, the word amo in third person, flipping, I'm directly addressing God, even in that sentence, blessed are you, God. But then instead of saying Amcha Yisrael, your nation, I'm saying his nation, moving to third person. And that always makes it suspect in my mind of how original that is. And indeed, in the Rishalmi, in the Eretz Yisrael Talmud, this bracha is referred to often without the word amo, just mikabetz nidchei Yisrael, which could be perhaps the original ending of this bracha, although it's not attested to in any Siddur text that we have. So this is our bracha, relatively short bracha, and I want to look at the theme today of Tekah b'shofar gadol, what it means for the great shofar to be sounded. To note, although the word shofar shows up obviously a lot in the Bible, shofar gadol shows up also a number of times in the Bible and always has sort of a redemptive aspect and connotation to it. The great shofar is not just a regular shofar sound. It is really the sounding of the end of time in many ways, or some great saving that's taking place with the shofar gadol. So let's take a look at the source text of where this is most likely coming from Isaiah chapter 27. V'haya bayom hahu yitaka b'shofar gadol. On that day, another phrase that also indicates the end of time. On that day in the future, what will happen? A great shofar will be sounded. This is in the passive voice, although some midrashim read it as active voice, I think. Yitaka b'shofar gadol. The great shofar will be sounded, and that's our bracha. Tekah b'shofar gadol. That's our request, is that this day come. Yitaka b'shofar gadol. And then what happens as a result of the shofar being blown? Uva'u ha'ovdim be'eretz Ashur v'anidachim be'eretz Mitzrayim v'yishtachavu Adonai Bahar HaKodesh B'Yerushalayim. So we have these two groups of exiles, those who are lost in the land of Assyria and those who are scattered in the land of Egypt shall come and worship Hashem on the holy mountain in Jerusalem. So again, here, like some of the versions in our bracha that were added later, we have the where everybody's going to be gathered, where they're all going to be coming. They're going to be coming to Har HaKodesh B'Yerushalayim on the holy mountain in Jerusalem. And who are the exiles that are being referred to? It's those who live in the land of Ashur, of Assyria, and those who live in the land of Mitzrayim. Now, in the biblical context, this seems to be, the lost tribes, those who were exiled in the Assyrian attack in the north, in which the 10 tribes were exiled. They're going to come back, and that's sort of the maybe the political current events version of how to read this pasuk. But it was also read in a more end of time way, end of days way. And in order to see that, I wanted to enter us into a debate about who's coming back at the end of time, which chapter 10 of Masechet Sanhedrin is sort of dealing with. Who are those in the Jewish constellation who have chelek l'olam haba, who have a portion of the world to come, and who will be sort of resurrected when the time comes. So there's a debate in the Mishnah, which I didn't bring you, which is the debate between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. When we're debating, Rabbi Akiva says there are some people who are never coming back, who are just, their sin is too great, and as a result, they will not be there for the end of time. And those two categories include the 10 tribes, those who were exiled as a result of the Assyrian attack, and the generation that left Egypt but died in the desert. That is to say, those who went out of slavery, but did not make it to the promised land because they were in that first generation that rebelled and didn't listen to the report of the minority of the spies, and instead decided to say that they weren't able to enter the land of Israel. So Rabbi Akiva says that those two groups are unable to sort of make up for their sin and not going to be coming back in any way. But Rabbi Eliezer says, no, they will be coming back. And to back up Rabbi Eliezer's position, we have Rebbe, is living a few generations later, who says, Elu ve'elu yesh lahem chelek l'olam haba. Both of these groups, the 10 tribes that were exiled and the generation that sinned in Egypt, they have a portion of the world to come. And how do we know this? What's the proof text? It's our text from Isaiah. Those who are living in the land of Assyria will come back. Elu aseret hashvatim. Those are the 10 tribes, says Rebbe. V'anidachim be'eretz Mitzrayim, and those who are rejected or were scattered in the land of Egypt. Zedor Hamidbar. This is the generation of the desert. So it's not sort of you can imagine that those who are scattered, when Isaiah is speaking, includes those who are currently scattered into the land of Egypt. But Rebbe reads this as going way back to the time of the original exodus from Egypt. Hanidachim be'eretz Mitzrayim. Those people will, the Dor Midbar, those people will actually be able to come back. Elu ve'elu v'ishtachavu Adonai Bahar HaKodesh B'Yerushalayim. They will all be able to come back and prostrate to God on Har HaKodesh. So there's a sort of a return theme here, clearly, but also a forgiveness theme. And the forgiveness we saw earlier, Slach Lanu, Hashivenu. But we are now coming back to that, and these categories of people who we thought wouldn't be able to ever be redeemed, at least according to Rabbi Akiva, they will be redeemed in the end, and that's what the great shofar is going to signify. I'm just going to bring one last midrash, that the ubishofar gadol yitaka. We're talking about in Isaiah. It's a passive voice. The great shofar will be sounded. But one midrash looks at that as an active verb. Yitka b'shofar gadol. God will blow this shofar. So who's blowing the shofar? Tika b'shofar gadol l'cherutenu. When we ask, we're asking God to blow the shofar. Presumably, we're praying towards God. Tika b'shofar is the request or the demand that we're making of God. And indeed, the midrash identifies God blowing on the shofar as the inverse of the exile. Shet pizeret Israel. When God scattered Israel, God scattered them by means of the shofar, as we learn in Jeremiah, for we hear the sounds of the shofar, kol shofar shamanu, alarms of war, disaster overtakes disaster, for all the land has been ravaged. That's the negative. That's the exile experience. But when God returns us and brings us back, God will bring us back also by means of the shofar. I'm reading here, Yitzka b'shofar gadol. On that day, God will blow on the great shofar, and in that way, the shofar becomes both the symbol of our dispersion, but sort of reverses course and becomes the symbol of our gathering in together. So that's just the beginning of this bracha. Tikab b'shofar gadol, asking God to blow the shofar and gather us in. We're going to look at the other phrases as we move through the week, wishing everybody a Shavua Tov.